Welcome to the All the Hats We Wear podcast. If you want a joyful, productive, and fulfilling life, then you need a system for managing all the hats that you wear. My name is Scott Snow, and I created a course to help you identify your roles, clarify your goals, uncover your mission, manage your large projects, and unleash your creativity. If that sounds good to you, then you're in the right place. You're meant to do great things. Let's talk about the skills you need to do them. One of the most important skills that I've found that is a great habit to get into is creating an audio journal. And that's where you just use your phone and a couple of minutes a day, just blab on your phone about your day. And the way you have to do this is you have your capture notebook. Here's mine, and I use a it's like an art drawing notebook, a sketch notebook, and it's blank, but it's kind of thick paper. And I never thought I would like this for my planner, basically, but it's a capture notebook, and it really works out well. It's very durable. I have it everywhere I go. I flop it in the front seat of the car, and I open it up at work. I've got it always open at home, so it's really invaluable. And this is where you capture all your greatest ideas throughout the day. And I like the little anarchy symbol because I tend to think of creativity as having really no rules. It just goes wherever the hell it wants. And I like that. So the first step to starting an audio journal habit is to get a capture notebook and then just jot down interesting things that happen throughout the day. It could be that you bonded with somebody. It could be an idea you had. It could be anything that comes up. Also, I like to use 3 different pens. I was looking for one here, but I use a red for the audio journal stuff, black for miscellaneous everything, and a green for anything related to the podcast or social media for my business or my business in general, all the hats we wear. This way, right at a glance, I can see, what information goes where, and it's really helpful. The next step, once you get your capture notebook and start paying attention to those interesting things that happen throughout the day, because there's going to be a lot of them once you're open to seeing them. You want to have the right attitude when you're doing your little dictation. I call it kind of a rant. And don't be afraid to just let loose and just gab away. It could be in your car. It could be anywhere, but I like to have some privacy. So you always have a place you can go, hopefully, to just blab away. And, even if you start by saying, I can't frickin' believe blah, 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 get in state, get moving, get your blood flowing. This is where you're going to have the best ideas because you're going to start to get in state. And then one idea is going to lead you to another. And you're hearing yourself being excited and getting into it. And that's going to even build it even more. And I really think this type of audio journal is much more therapeutic. I'm not saying always be negative or, I can't believe that this happened. But that's just a starting point. Of course, you could do the opposite, for things that are very positive. I can't believe that this is so awesome. And I think this is more therapeutic than, like a cold plunge. And, sometimes you read about people's routines and they sound fantastic, like hard to believe. I wake up at 4 and I run for 12 miles and then I have a gratitude journal that I write in. And it just seems like, I don't know. For me, it seems very stodgy and kind of stale. So I say use it to basically it should be like a rant. An audio rant is more a better way to describe your audio journal. Well, there's been plenty of things happening in the news, and I do feel like my new set here is kind of like the All the Hats We Wear newscast. So I kind of like that. And we had an NFL draft. And of course, my family is into the fantasy football, and that's a lot of fun. So, but what struck me seeing this, and I'm amazed that 200,000 people show up just to see who got picked for your team. But people are passionate about their teams, and that's cool. But I started to imagine, like, what if all of my roles were gathered and expecting to hear about what my new role is going to be? I'm all about roles that we play and all the different hats that we wear. Maybe they're all in a group and they're awaiting, what is the next exciting direction that we're going towards. And that's fun. Maybe it's the roles saying these are the new attributes that we need to do. Because they always make a big announcement, the New England Patriots select blah, blah, blah. So maybe you could say, well, your transcendental meditation role chose consistency. So you can nerd out about it. And maybe you have a new inspirational model for what you're trying to do for your mission statement. Maybe Anthony Bourdain is your new model for being authentic and being real in their presentation or fashion. I always thought that an interesting domain name would be how to be an interesting person because I do feel that it's tough to find someone that you can connect with in conversation, especially a stranger, that you really dig in and enjoy the conversation on a really deep level. And now it seems to me when I go to networking events or even parties, get together, social things, that I find a hard time just finding someone who will reciprocate even just a little bit. I think to be an interesting person, you have to have these things on the back burners. You have to have done some self-development work. You have to know your passions, hobbies, and interests. And you have to know the roles that you play and the roles that you want to be playing, your goals, your mission statements, why things are important to you. You've got to know what projects you have on the horizon and why, and you have to have great habits that excite you. So these are all parts, I think, of being an interesting person. And a lot of times you'll talk to someone at a convention or something, and you're doing a great job listening to them, and they're just spieling about themselves, which is fine, but then you never get that turnaround. You never get them to be interested in you. So I believe going through this All the Hats We Wear course is a perfect way to start getting to be more interesting. In fact, I always thought that this would be a great thing to do for a dating club. You do this self work, personal work, and then you can hand over the document to the person you're interested in and go, here's everything that's really interesting. Here's everything that's super important to me. These are my passions. This is everything, and that really would get you going. I think that would really get you on a better start than all these kind of pained conversations about this, and it just seems to be painstaking to get to anything that's, you're like jabbing in the dark to find any real things that are in connection when you could already have done that and say, here it is. Also, knowing your goals. That's a great thing to talk about. And in this system, the All the Hats We Wear system, we use 4 different types of goals. Action goals, and these are just like a rule for yourself. I meditate for 20 minutes once a day. We have deadline goals. Of course, that has a deadline attached. By April 3rd, I'm scuba certified. Stop goals. What are you going to stop? I'm going to stop eating food after 4:30 p.m. And bucket list goal, of course, what's on the horizon. One bucket list item for me is coming up this weekend, and that's the Kentucky Derby. I've always been fascinated with the Kentucky Derby, so some year I'll get out to Kentucky and watch that. Of course, just having the audio journal brings up a lot of creativity, unleashes your creativity, in my opinion, gives you ideas and things that are always right on the surface. And once you have one good idea, like when you have your capture notebook, don't wait. You get the idea, jot it right down. This is meant to be a working notebook. It's okay to get coffee stains on it and oatmeal stains or whatever. And because once you capture that idea, I guarantee you'll have a couple more that bubble up right after it. Whereas if you're looking through different tabs in a complicated notebook and the color schemes and different color marker and all this, you're going to slow yourself down. You don't want to slow yourself down once you get into that zone. You want to release the floodgates and capture it all. And you can do that with this capture notebook. Also, asking quality questions is a great way to be creative and be interesting. Another really effective thing to do in the All the Hats We Wear system is to list the obstacles. And this is where you want to be really honest, and it's going to be a little painful, but get in that habit of identifying the things that are in your way, your obstacles. I've been doing a word of the day feature from my social media, and that's just a kind of an easy way to, well, for one, I really love new vocabulary and I love words, but it gives you a word to start to use, like a color word, something that's a little interesting, the out of the ordinary words. And the word of the day last week for one day was leitmotif, which is a musical term. You know, it's a recurring musical theme that brings back an idea. For example, Star Wars. John Williams, the composer, great composer, uses a theme for each character. And whenever you see that character throughout the whole series, that music is with it. So it's a very powerful way to bring back that idea without saying, this is this idea. And a great exercise to do once you identify all the different hats that you wear is to try to select a piece of music, a song that represents that role that you have. For me, music that represents music, an example is Katie Lang, her album Ingenue is a album that really resonated for me when I moved to California 30 years ago. And I was on my own. It was very, I had the independence and it just felt really good. And that album captured that perfectly. So whenever I hear that album, I just think about driving over the big hill in California for the first morning and just seeing the ocean as far as I can see and just knowing that I made the right decision to go there. So try making a list of your roles and then a piece of music to go with it. Another way to be an interesting person is to have interesting hobbies to look forward to. Here's an example. This summer, for some reason, I'm really interested in tiki drinks, tiki cocktails. I'd love to have a tiki bar. And this just brings up, it's a kind of a spark of an idea that I had even as a kid when you would go to Chinese restaurants back in the mid 70s and early 80s. It seemed to be much more Polynesian. You always had Hawaiian music playing at Chinese restaurants and a lot more waterfalls and more of a set. And, you really are stepping into something different back then. And it was really awesome. So that made a big impression on me. And I have a big interest in mixology as well. So I figured this summer is going to be tiki summer for me. I'm going to get some new glasses and cups, the tiki ones. That's not going to be too expensive. Get some rums and some bitters and some different liqueurs that go well with that, and just have fun with it. So that's something I can look forward to, and that brings an enormous amount of joy when you have that simple idea to look forward to and just to build upon. Another big story was the passing of Pope Francis. And for some reason, I really enjoy watching big stately funerals. In fact, I kind of enjoy wakes and funerals in general, which is strange, I know, which sometimes you can't tell what is strange and what's interesting, right? But I tend to be of the opinion that it's more interesting than strange. Weird ideas are interesting. I enjoyed how the Pope chose this simple wooden cypress casket, and he really focused on the simple things. He only had his name, Franciscus, which is Francis in Latin, I guess, on his gravestone, his marker. So just a very simple, to the point, and to break down the walls, to be at one with the people was his whole attitude, and I appreciate that. I love the music, the choral music and the Latin. I like all that. I like everything about it. I liked seeing the priests from all around the world, and everybody had their different outfits, and people had their sunglasses and a long beard, but then they had, kind of a odd, strange apparel that they're wearing. And I just thought it was fascinating. I guess the Pope had a very pastoral vision, which was described, pastoral vision, simple, pure. And in the homily, they said that he had a guiding thread of his mission, which was that the church should be a home for all, a home with its doors always open. I remember a few months ago, I thought it was very interesting too. And speaking of being interesting, I think reading the paper is a great way to be interesting, to have things to talk about. And not just, watching the news on TV where they just feed you whatever stories they want to feed you. With a newspaper, you can zero into whatever catches your fancy. And I like that way much better. In fact, I prefer the physical paper over the internet, the digital. But I've tried to switch to the digital memberships for the Boston Globe, New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. But I'm getting there. If I can do it quickly, I do it. But on the weekend, I usually splurge and buy physical newspapers because I like to spread them out. I have my iced coffee and I just enjoy going through the paper. But anyway, a couple months ago, I remember the Pope was getting very ill and he was struggling at night. It sounded like he was having like terrible nightmares about demons and all this. And I thought that was very interesting. Here's probably the most holy person in the world, struggling so much with demons. And I believe he suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's. So maybe that had part of it too, but very interesting, strange thing. Almost sounds like a horror movie. But I was interested to hear that. That struck me as being very interesting. And I remember envying the local pastor that they would live in the rectory all week and have a lot of quiet time, it seemed, to reflect and to basically build up some ideas for the Sunday sermon or a minister, that's what they would do. And that kind of approach is very appealing to me. I like to be the one sitting around thinking and stewing and being open and forming ideas and then having something to say, on Sunday or for my podcast. Another way to be interesting, I believe, at parties is to talk about what you're reading. And I'm reading a couple books here. One is about transcendental meditation by Jack Forum. And I love hearing about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the little Indian man who basically created this transcendental meditation, or he didn't create it, but he was like this generation's, big founder. Also, in addition to the good and the positive, I like to read true crime. So here is the biography about the Unabomber, because that's interesting to me as well. You got the dichotomy. In dichotomy, the opposites are always interesting. Juxtaposition is interesting. I just finished my deck, which is a course that's available on my website. You can get all of these cards, and there's a nearly an hour long video that goes with it. And you can go through all these cards and you talk about all these different things and you lay out the cards in front of you like you're playing solitaire. And it's a great way to get an overview of your busy life. Also, I originally made this booklet, which has a lot of spaces for the reader to write out. Like when you're working on your mini mission statement, you can start to brainstorm in here and then you do your final edition. Or when you're focused on project management and following the 7 steps of project management in this course, very helpful. But what I'm thinking, here's the project management, where it had basically it's 7 stages of creating a project from beginning to end. And it's a really interesting approach to a creative project. I'll just give you a little sneak peek here. The 7 stages of project management are: 1, to identify the spark. Whereas most people would focus on what's the problem to fix, I focus on identifying that emotional connection because that's what's going to give you the impetus to drive you through. Stage 2 is the gathering stage. Bring all the info in related to it. Just open the floodgates again. Brainstorming is the 3rd. Ask a lot of questions. Structure would be the 4th stage. What are the parameters for this? What are the big brass tacks of this project? And then we have the action step. Roll up your sleeves and start doing the actual work. And then we get to the refining stage and then celebration stage. So all of these stages give you the ammunition you need to coast right through to the end of the completion of this project. I'm actually working on making a more comprehensive book than this that would include, you know, research articles that support all of these things. And I think I'm going to take more of a focus on creativity because I've always felt that that's my biggest attribute, being a lifelong musician and music therapist and composer, poet, creative writer. So I think without bragging, I believe that's my greatest strength. And so I'm looking to do more speaking engagements and filling out this book. So those are the things that are on my plate. Also, a pretty interesting thing happened to me. I became ordained by the Church of the Latter-day Dude. So this is a certification of my being ordained. You know, the dude from The Big Lebowski. So I don't know what it means, but I am a an official Latter-day Dude. And you can do that for free. You just go Dudism. Dudism.com. Dudeism. In Dude we trust. So if you want to do that, you can too. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on this podcast episode, How to Be an Interesting Person. And I'm sure that you're an interesting person. Let me know in social media or comments or email me at scottsnow1234@gmail.com. Or you can text me 774-230-3928. You could visit my website, allthehatswewear.com, or all my social media and say hi, and we can get started on identifying your roles. See you soon.